Beneath the frozen crust of Europa, one of Jupiter's many moons, the ice cracked with a deep groaning sound as the Catal excavation crew drilled downward into the ancient vault. The structure was buried far below the surface, hidden under layers of ice and forgotten time. The crew, a mix of alien scientists and machine assistants, moved carefully through the massive chamber they had uncovered, a place untouched for 5,000 years. Strange markings covered the dark metal walls, symbols that shimmered faintly when light hit them. Varric, the lead xenologist, felt uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. The deeper they went, the more unnatural everything felt. At the center of the vault stood a single pod, tall, smooth, silent. It hummed with a low vibration that pulsed like a heartbeat. Scanners failed to read inside, and the material was harder than any known alloy. Layers of energy shields surrounded it, each one encoded in languages long dead. The crew watched as Varric, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, activated the translation software. The system flickered, struggled, then displayed a final message across the hovering screen. Here sleeps the last of humanity. Do not wake the beast. Silence filled the chamber. The other crew members exchanged nervous glances, but no one spoke. The name, Humanity, was a legend, a name whispered in warning during history lectures and military briefings. They were gone, wiped out during the Great Convergence Wars, their violence too vast, their knowledge too dangerous. Varric stared at the pod. Could it really be true? Could a human have survived all this time sleeping beneath Europa while the galaxy moved on? His hands trembled as he reached for the control panel. Warnings blinked red across the screen, advising against deactivation. But Varric had already made his choice. With a quiet command, the shields began to fall one by one, each collapse sending a pulse through the chamber like the beat of a war drum. The final barrier dropped with a soft hum, and then the pod opened. Mist hissed out, cold and thick. Inside, a figure slowly rose. Pale skin, frost-covered eyelashes, and eyes that opened not with fear, but with calm awareness. The figure stepped forward, stumbled, then straightened. He looked around slowly, breathing in the sterile air. He was human. There was no mistake. The scanners confirmed it instantly. Varric stepped forward and introduced himself, but the man didn't answer. He turned his gaze to the crew, eyes scanning faces, claws, horns, feathers. He looked out of place, fragile even, yet there was something dangerous beneath his quiet surface. Finally, he spoke. "What year is it?" His voice was hoarse but clear. Varric told him the truth. 5,000 years had passed. The man didn't look shocked. Instead, he smiled faintly. "Who won?" he asked. No one understood the question, not at first. Varric explained the galaxy was now at peace, ruled by the Catal Dominion, and humanity had been extinct for millennia. At this, the man chuckled, just once. "Wrong answer," he whispered. Then, as the crew watched in stunned silence, he walked past them toward the exit tunnel without another word. Lights flickered overhead. The vault, once dormant, began to awaken. Systems long shut down sparked to life. Doors unlocked. Walls shifted. The human, still weak but steady, moved with purpose, as if he knew every corner of this ancient place. Varric tried to stop him, tried to explain the danger, but the man just looked back and said, "You shouldn't have woken me." Then he vanished into the shadows of the vault, leaving behind a crew that no longer felt in control, and a sense that something far older and more terrifying than they could imagine had just stirred from its slumber. Commander Elias Reeve stood at the edge of the frozen tunnel, breathing slowly, his bare feet crunching against the frost-covered metal floor, each step echoing through the ancient vault beneath Europa. Behind him, the Catal scientists whispered in nervous tones, unsure if they should follow or flee. Varric, torn between fear and fascination, chose to stay close. Reeve moved like a man with purpose, even though he had just awakened from 5,000 years of stasis. He didn't ask questions, he didn't panic. He only observed, quietly and sharply, his eyes always scanning, as if reading every line in the walls. Inside one of the chamber rooms, he found a broken terminal. To the crew's surprise, he knelt beside it, opened a panel, and began to rewire it using nothing but a few wires and his own knowledge. Within seconds, the terminal lit up, displaying symbols that hadn't been seen since the days of human dominance. A security map of the vault appeared, and Reeves studied it as if he had seen it before. "There are more of these," he said quietly, pointing to sealed chambers deeper underground. "How many did you open?" Varric swallowed hard. "Only one." "Yours." Reeve nodded once, then turned back toward the tunnel. His body was changing quickly, his muscles rebuilding, his skin warming, his balance returning faster than any species had seen. One of the Catal assistants whispered, "That's not natural." They were right. Reeves' recovery wasn't normal, not even by advanced biological standards. It was as if his body remembered what it needed to be, and was rushing to catch up. Back in the upper chamber, the crew gave him food and basic clothing. He accepted it without thanks. He ate like a soldier, quickly, silently, efficiently. When Varric asked him how he knew their language, Reeves simply answered, "We planned for this." No one understood what that meant. Later, as Varric tried to record a report for the Dominion, Reeve accessed the alien ship's terminal and locked down its communications. "No calls," he said firmly. "Not yet." Varric protested, saying the discovery of a living human had to be shared. But Reeve stared at him with such stillness that even the guards stepped back. "You don't know what you've done," he said. "You don't know what I am." That night, though no one slept, Reeve walked alone into the vault and sat before a giant wall of metal engraved with ancient human text. He placed his hand against it. It lit up instantly, reacting to his touch, revealing hidden passages beneath the ice. "This place isn't just a tomb," he whispered to himself. "It's a key." Varric, watching from a distance, asked what he meant. Reeve stood, looking tired now, but his eyes burned with something old. "They told you we died," he said. "But we didn't. We hid. We gave the galaxy peace because we were the only ones who could destroy it. We buried our weapons, shut down our fleets, and sealed ourselves away so we wouldn't become monsters." He stepped closer to Varric. "And now, you've opened the cage." Before Varric could respond, an alarm blared across the ship's comms. One of the orbiting satellites had activated, an old Earth satellite, dead for millennia. Somehow, it had received a signal from the vault and was now online. It sent a single word to the Dominion's channels: "Reclaimed." The Catal crew panicked, unsure what it meant, but Reeve only smiled. "Earth heard me," he said, "and it's waking." Up. In the control room, the lights flickered. An ancient Earth tech within the vault came online, connecting to systems far beyond the moon. Something was moving in the deep, beneath the ice, beneath the rock, beyond Europa. The past was rising. And Elias Reeve, the last of humanity, wasn't just a relic. He was the warning. The beast had been asleep. Now it remembered. The journey to Earth was silent and cold, filled with tension that grew heavier with each passing hour, as the Catal vessel cut through the black void of space, carrying Commander Elias Reeve and the nervous crew toward a planet that had not seen life in 5,000 years. Varric watched Reeve closely, still trying to understand the human's calm, his stillness, the strange mix of peace and power that surrounded him like an invisible storm. Reeve rarely spoke, but when he did, his words were sharp and final, as if each one carried weight from a forgotten time. As they neared the solar system, strange signals started to echo across the ship's receivers, fragments of ancient Earth languages, coded bursts, distant whispers from machines that should no longer function. The Catal engineers panicked, trying to block them. But Reeve only listened, eyes closed, head tilted as though he could understand them without help. "They're waiting," he said, and no one dared ask who they were. When the ship entered orbit around Earth, the crew looked down in shock. The planet was not dead, not entirely. Though its surface looked cracked and broken, covered in dust and shadows, thousands of lights flickered across old continents, silent, organized, pulsing in patterns that had no natural explanation. Satellites once thought to be lost slowly. Rotated back into position, automated defenses scanned the ship but didn't fire. Reeve stood at the front of the viewing deck, arms crossed, face unreadable. "It remembers me," he whispered, then turned to Varric. "Take me to the surface." Varric hesitated, but the look in Reeve's eyes left no room for argument. They landed near what had once been North America, though now it was mostly gray plains and steel ruins. Massive towers, crumbled but not collapsed, lined the horizon. The moment Reeve stepped onto the surface, the ground beneath them hummed. Old power lines lit up, doors unlocked, machines buried deep below rumbled. Awake. The Catal scanned the area and found no life signs, no animals, no plants, but hundreds of dormant machines, now flickering with renewed power. Reeve walked forward with confidence, like a man returning home. He led them to a massive underground facility hidden beneath a collapsed city. With one hand pressed against a rusted panel, he activated it and the doors opened with a loud hiss. Inside, everything was still clean, preserved by auto systems that had never failed. The air was breathable, the lights pure and white. Deep within the facility was a control room, and when Reeve sat in the central chair, it lit up in blue and gold, scanning his body, then welcoming him with a soft voice. "Commander Elias Reeve. Status confirmed. Initiating global reactivation protocol. Across Earth, silent machines rose from the ground. Defense satellites turned to face the stars. Factories rebuilt themselves. Old war drones powered up and began organizing into formations. The Catal crew watched in horror. "You're rearming the planet," Varric said, his voice shaking. Reeve nodded. "Earth is waking. It won't let the past repeat." Varric tried to ask more, but the systems were already working faster than he could follow. Even worse, other signals were being sent. Deep space pulses traveling through wormhole comms, aimed at forgotten human colonies and distant relay stations. Something far bigger than they had imagined was unfolding. Reeve explained that Earth had never truly fallen. It had been hidden, shielded behind walls of misinformation, automated counter-invasion systems, and dormant AI guardians. The myth of humanity's extinction had been carefully planted, a lie that had been believed by an entire galaxy. But now that one human had returned, Earth recognized the signal and responded. Reeve stood again and pointed to a star map on the main screen. "This is not a return," he said. "This is a reckoning. We gave the galaxy peace by disappearing, but now they've disturbed the silence." Just as he spoke, one of the satellite feeds zoomed in on a moving object, a small, fast Catal scout ship approaching Earth, likely sent by the Dominion to monitor the situation. Reeve watched it for a moment, then typed in a command. The Earth-based defense grid locked on but did not fire. Instead, it sent a warning. "Unauthorized presence detected. Leave orbit within 2 minutes." The scout ship hesitated, then fled. Varric turned to Reeve, his voice full of concern. "Are you going to start a war?" Reeve looked at the glowing map, then at the rising armies of machines now forming in silent order across the globe. "That depends," he answered. "I didn't wake up to fight. I woke up to protect. But if they push, if they lie again, then the ghosts of Earth will not stay silent." And as the planet lit up one system at a time, and the stars beyond began to whisper with the news that humanity had returned, one truth settled in everyone's heart. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to fear, but now it would remember. The Yao. Skies above Earth grew darker as hidden weapons began to rise from the ground, long-buried towers unfolding like metal flowers under the command of Elias Reeve, the last human. Varric and the Catal crew watched from the safety of their shuttle, unsure if they were guests, prisoners, or witnesses to something ancient and terrifying. Across the ruined continents, launch silos opened, railguns locked into position, and drone armies formed neat rows, all without a single spoken command. The machines moved with eerie precision, as if guided by a single mind. Reeves. In the control chamber deep underground, he stood before a glowing console, hands steady, eyes focused. His voice was calm, but each word carried a silent storm. "This isn't just Earth's defense," he said. "This is the last arsenal of humanity." As he spoke, holograms appeared, maps of old battlefields, diagrams of weapons the galaxy had never seen, machines too large to move, too deadly to ever use. They had names like Stormborn, Leviathan, and Whisper of Endings, each sealed deep within bunkers hidden beneath oceans and mountains. The Catal had never believed such things could exist, and now they watched them come to life like ancient beasts shaking off dust. One of the crew, a young technician named Kell, tried to warn the Dominion through a hidden channel, but the signal was cut off instantly. The control system had detected it. The walls turned red, and the doors sealed shut. Reeve didn't yell or threaten. He simply looked at Kell and said, "Earth doesn't forget betrayal." Kell froze, realizing that no one here was in control, except the human. Then suddenly the alarms changed tone. A fleet was approaching, not just a scout, but a Dominion war group, 5 ships strong. They had arrived faster than expected, ready to investigate and, if needed, destroy. The Catal crew panicked, pleading with Reeve to respond peacefully. He said nothing, only pressed a command into the console. In orbit, one of Earth's old defense stations came online, an invisible platform hidden in the shadow of the moon. It had no crew, only AI, and it activated without hesitation. The Dominion fleet paused, detecting the signal too late. In a flash, one of the warships vanished, consumed by a silent energy blast that left no explosion, only a glowing dust cloud. The rest of the fleet scrambled, calling for reinforcements, but Reeve had already turned away from the screen. "They had their warning," he said. The ground trembled as more systems powered on. Space elevators retracted, deep-sea reactors roared, and orbiting satellites formed a net around the planet. Varric stood beside him, eyes wide with fear and awe. "Why did your kind build so much destruction?" he asked. Reeve's face was hard. "Because once, long ago, the galaxy tried to erase us. We gave them peace, and in return they feared us. So we built this place, not to conquer, but to make sure no one could ever finish what they started." His voice grew colder. "Now they come again." More signals lit up the star map. Other ancient human colonies, long believed dead, were stirring. Some were sending back strange codes. Others, dark for millennia, simply turned on their defense beacons. Humanity had not vanished. It had hidden, scattered its seeds far across the stars, waiting for the right time. And now, with Reeve awake, the call had gone out. Return. The Catal scientists, once so confident in their power, now huddled in silence, unsure what future they had awakened. Earth, forgotten and broken, was no longer asleep. Its arsenal had awakened. Its ghosts were rising. And Elias Reeve, the last of his kind, was no longer just a man. He was the trigger. Across the stars, the name Elias Reeve spread like a storm, whispered in fear by admirals, scholars, and rulers who had long believed humanity was extinct. Nothing more than a dangerous myth buried beneath time. But now Earth was awake, its weapons live and its silence broken. And that silence was more terrifying than war. The Dominion's high councils, once so sure of their strength, held emergency meetings as system after system reported flickers of human signals. Ghost colonies lighting up, hidden satellites blinking to life, and black boxes transmitting fragments of ancient warnings. No one knew how many remained, or what they had become during 5,000 years of isolation. On Europa, the Catal crew, still trapped with Reeve inside the Earth control chamber, lived in constant tension. Machines moved quietly through the halls, never attacking, never speaking, yet watching always. Varric tried to understand Reeve, speaking to him during the long hours when the stars outside shifted slowly across the sky. "You could have stayed hidden," Varric said once, trying to sound calm. "You could have lived in peace." Reeve did not look at him. "We did," he answered. But peace ends the moment someone knocks on the door with a loaded weapon. The words chilled Varric. Outside, the Dominion's remaining fleet stayed just beyond Earth's defense line, unsure whether to strike or retreat. They had seen one of their ships vanish in silence. Now they hesitated, and it was that hesitation that scared them the most. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion was afraid, not of numbers or ships, but of a memory, fear of what had once been, of what humanity had been capable of. A fear passed down in old records and secret warnings. Varric remembered the lessons from school. Humanity had fought with fire that consumed whole systems, had built machines that learned too quickly, and had turned entire planets into weapons. They had not lost the war. They had vanished, chosen to erase themselves. But the stories always ended with one warning. If ever they returned, they would not come back weak. Now Reeve sat like a ghost in a command chair, once thought dead, and the galaxy watched. Inside Earth's vault, deeper doors unlocked on their own, revealing old laboratories with technology the Catal could barely understand. One chamber held still living samples, creatures born from human bioscience, asleep in tanks, half organic, half machine. Another room revealed blueprints for weapons that used gravity itself as ammunition. And none of it was being used, yet. That was what frightened Varric the most. Reeve had the power to destroy, but he didn't. He was waiting, watching, testing. "What are you planning?" Varric asked one night, his voice shaking. Reeve finally looked at him, eyes sharp as blades. "I'm not planning anything," he said. "I'm waiting to see what you plan." Meanwhile, out in deep space, something darker stirred. A forgotten human AI, one of the oldest war minds, received Reeve's signal and responded. It called itself Argent Memory, and its ship, hidden for thousands of years in the cold of interstellar dark space, now powered up. The Dominion intercepted the signal and tried to block it, but it was too late. More ancient AIs began waking, spreading their own signals, reaching out to the fragments of mankind scattered like dust across the stars. On alien worlds, ancient vaults opened, releasing drones that scanned for humans. On distant moons, ghost cities lit up in perfect silence. Each one was a piece of a puzzle the galaxy had forgotten, but now the pieces were moving again. Elias. Reeve knew it, and he waited. Not to lead, not to conquer, but to see who would attack first. Because once that happened, once the galaxy chose war, the forgotten would no longer be silent. They would rise, and this time there would be no peace left to bury them. Far above Earth, in the cold dark between stars, the Dominion fleet floated like silent sentries, afraid to move forward, afraid to retreat, locked in a standoff with a planet that had not spoken a single word in its own defense. Inside the lead ship, Admiral Tyrell stood stiffly before a glowing screen, her long fingers tapping the edge as she stared at the blue and green world that once burned with war and now pulsed with quiet power. Every scan told the same story. Impossible. Defense systems, impossible energy readings, and one human alive where none should be. Her orders from the Dominion High Council were clear: observe, assess, and, if needed, neutralize. But something in her bones screamed against it. No one had fired since the last ship vanished in silence, but tension had built like static, waiting for a spark. That spark came from a frightened mind. On Europa, one of the Catal crew, a young xenotech named Selleck, believed he had found a weakness in Earth's defense code. He had been watching the systems, tracing energy loops and AI logic paths, thinking perhaps he could prove himself useful by seizing control. Late one cycle, when Reeve was gone from the control chamber, Selleck tried. With shaking hands and silent breath, he launched a hidden override, a simple signal meant to test access. But Earth didn't forgive. The moment the signal touched its defenses, a ripple moved through the planet like thunder rolling under skin. Satellites turned, platforms aligned, and high above the storm began. One of the Dominion frigates blinked out of existence, consumed by an energy beam that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It didn't explode, it simply ceased to be, erased so completely that not even debris remained. The rest of the fleet panicked, engines igniting, shields raised. On Europa, alarms wailed as the vault system surged, walls glowing with heat, turrets rising from hidden ports. Selleck backed away from the console, eyes wide with horror, whispering, "I just wanted to see if it was real." Reeve entered the room, his face colder than ice. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. "And now they'll see it too," he said. "The storm has started." Across the galaxy, watchers blinked in fear as Earth's signal changed. The silence was over. Human satellites began to transmit new messages, old languages wrapped in warning codes. One message repeated again and again: "We are still here." Old colonies that had stayed quiet for centuries suddenly flared to life. On the edge of known space, a rogue moon lit up with energy signatures not seen in 5,000 years. On an abandoned mining world, automated war drones rose from the soil, scanning for targets. On every channel, every frequency, across every system, one thing was now certain. Humanity had not been destroyed. It had waited, and now it moved. Varric tried to calm the situation, broadcasting pleas to the Dominion to stand down, to speak, to listen, but no one answered. Fear moved faster than reason. Reeve stood in silence, watching the storm unfold. "They will come now," he said softly. "They won't understand this isn't revenge. It's a reaction. They made the first move." "You could stop it," Varric said. "Shut it all down. Tell them the truth." Reeve turned, his eyes tired but unyielding. "They don't want the truth. They want control. And that's what made us dangerous before, because we refused to be controlled." Deeper in the vault, more systems awakened. Old minds, once human, now machine, stirred from digital sleep. They remembered war, they remembered betrayal, and they remembered Reeve. He had not been just a soldier in the past. He had been a key, chosen to be locked away until the time came. Not because he was the strongest, but because he was the one who had said no when others begged for conquest. Earth hadn't hidden its weapons out of fear. It had hidden him. Now he stood ready, not to strike, but to survive what he knew was coming. The galaxy would not believe that humans could choose peace. They would only see the storm and believe the beasts had returned. But Reeve knew better. He had seen what came after fear, what always followed misunderstanding and pride. And as the Dominion's largest war fleet gathered at the edge of the solar system, ready to test its strength against a world that had once burned the stars, Reeve whispered a single truth to himself. We were never monsters. We were mirrors. And now they must see what they've become. The spark had come. The storm was here. And Earth, forgotten, buried, and feared, was no longer asleep. Elias Reeve stood alone in the heart of the vault, deep beneath Europa's icy crust, as cold blue lights flickered across ancient screens and machines hummed with new life, yet everything around him felt like a grave. The Catal crew kept their distance now, speaking in whispers and walking softly, as if the air itself had turned heavy with fear. The Dominion's warships hung on the edge of the solar system, their weapons charged, unsure if they were witnessing a resurrection or the return of a nightmare, and still no one dared make the next move. But Reeve knew war was close. He could feel it crawling through the wires and satellites like fire under skin. And yet, even as systems readied and automated arsenals stood by for his command, he made no move to attack. Instead, he returned to the deepest chamber, where the oldest doors had only just unlocked, revealing something that hadn't seen light in 5,000 years. It was a sealed archive, not of weapons, but of memories, data cores holding truth, untwisted by time or fear, untouched by propaganda or lies. It was the real history of Earth's fall. Reeve activated the first core, and a ghostly image appeared. Human leaders in their final days, not screaming for vengeance, but begging the galaxy for peace. He watched old footage of the last human council, their voices tired, hands shaking, sending messages to alien empires that went unanswered. They had offered technology, protection, knowledge. But the galaxy had seen strength and called it danger. Humanity was not hunted because it was evil. It was feared because it had learned too fast, survived too much, and asked too many questions. That fear had become hate, and that hate had turned to war. Not one started by humans, but one finished by them, in fire and silence. When the war finally ended, the few who remained chose not to rise again. They vanished by choice, hid their worlds, buried their weapons, and scattered their survivors across the stars like seeds. Elias was one of them, frozen by design, not to lead revenge, but to awaken only if the fear returned. And now it had. As Reeve moved deeper into the archive, he found something stranger, a hidden chamber holding messages not from humans, but from aliens who had helped them. Varric followed him, uneasy but curious, and together they played the next file. A reptilian creature, long dead now, appeared on the screen, speaking in broken English. "If this message is heard," it said, "then the lie has lived too long. We were part of it. We believed the fear. We helped burn your worlds. But some of us learned too late. You were not the threat. We were the ones who could not understand." The confession continued, naming worlds that had turned against humans out of pressure from the Dominion, naming officials who erased peace offers and replaced them with doctored footage of violence. The truth was worse than war. It was betrayal, dressed as justice. Varric stared in silence, his mind spinning. Everything he had been taught, everything he had believed about humans, their cruelty, their madness, their extinction, had been shaped by fear, not fact. Reeve looked at him, no anger in his face, only exhaustion. "This is why I waited," he said. "Not for revenge, for someone to see." Outside, the Dominion fleet received Reeve's transmission, containing only the truth, the raw archive, unedited, undeniable. At first many refused to believe it, but it spread like wildfire. On worlds far and wide, soldiers, scientists, and citizens watched ancient lies fall apart. Some demanded answers from their leaders, others wept. A few in panic ordered attacks, but their own crews hesitated. Because truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. In the solar system, the war still hovered on the edge of ignition, but now it flickered. Some ships powered down. A few even left formation. On Europa, Varric made one final request to Reeve: broadcast it all, across every channel, across every star. And Reeve, after long silence, agreed. Earth's skies lit with signal fire as satellites turned toward the galaxy and spoke, not with weapons, but with words. Truths buried in ash, rising like smoke. The Dominion could no longer stop it. The storm had paused, not because of fear, but because of a truth stronger than any weapon. Elias Reeve did not smile. He simply said, "Now. They must choose, not who to fight, but who they really are." In the quiet after truth had been spoken, the stars seemed to hold their breath, and Elias Reeve stood at the edge of history, knowing peace could still slip away like smoke through fingers. Across the galaxy, millions now knew the real story of humanity's fall, and many questioned everything they had believed their entire lives, but not all were ready to let go of fear. In the Dominion's heart, in a fortress world called Zeveron, a new voice rose, a hard, cold voice that called the truth a trick, the archives a forgery, and Reeve a monster in disguise. High Strategist Viralis, a figure wrapped in metal and shadow, declared that hesitation was weakness, and warned that if they waited longer, Earth's beast would rise again and devour the stars. And so, ignoring the split in the council, Viralis launched a secret plan, a hidden fleet, armed with forbidden weapons, cloaked and sent straight toward Earth. Reeve had expected such a move. The systems around Europa saw the silent ships before they reached the orbit of Mars. They carried neutron burners, gravity lances, and one device older than the Dominion itself, an ancient core bomb made from human tech stolen long ago, powerful, enough to rip a planet in half. Reeve watched their approach from the Vault's command center, hands resting calmly on the console. He had given the galaxy a chance to listen, but now the enemy had chosen. As the hidden fleet broke from stealth, preparing to strike, Reeve whispered one word. Now. In that instant, the vault awakened fully. Across the system, black satellites that had once seemed dead unfolded like flowers in bloom, revealing weapons wrapped in silence and light. Around Jupiter, the rings of defense came alive, old AI war mines, each with a single task: protect the seed of Earth. As the Dominion's secret fleet opened fire, the sky became flame. Blades of light tore through space, erasing the attackers in moments. But the core bomb had already been launched, its course locked, aimed directly at Europa. There was no way to stop it, not with weapons, not with speed. But Reeve did not move to flee. Instead, he turned to the vault's final system, one not meant for war, but for memory. The vault had been built not just to hide, but to preserve the soul of humanity. In its center, beneath all the machines and data, was something older than technology. A living mind, the last fragment of an ancient AI once called the Shepherd, who had guided humanity through its darkest hours. Reeve reached into the core and woke the Shepherd. The AI spoke in a voice like music, soft and slow. "Elias Reeve, do you call for the last protocol?" Reeve nodded. "The galaxy must remember. Even if we fall, they must know who we were." The Shepherd hummed, then sent a pulse across the system, a signal that unlocked every vault, every satellite, every lost beacon seeded by humanity long ago. Across 100 systems, stories poured out. Voices, faces, lives once lost now reborn as memory. The galaxy began to see not just the war, but the people. Mothers, fathers, poets, teachers, children, all wiped out not by their own rage, but by fear they never asked for. As the core bomb neared Europa, Reeve stood alone at the vault's heart. Varric and the remaining Catal crew had already been evacuated, sent away on a shielded vessel with a copy of the truth. They had begged him to leave, but Reeve had refused. He knew what had to be done. When the bomb struck, it did not destroy the moon in fire. It hit a defense field woven from gravity and light, and for a moment the system itself bent. The bomb collapsed inward, crushed by forces it could not fight, and vanished without sound. But the energy released shook the vault, breaking walls, tearing systems apart. Lights failed, ceilings cracked, and in the center of it all, Reeve fell to one knee, breath shallow, blood in his mouth. The Shepherd's voice faded. "You have done what I could not," it said. "You showed them the beast was not us. It was their fear." Reeve smiled faintly. "Then let them remember." As the vault crumbled, the final message launched, a stream of light carrying every memory, every truth, every voice into the stars. Across the galaxy, people watched the story unfold, not through listening,